Hello, welcome to this new module which deals with net present value. Net present value is one of the most important tools in making capital budgeting decisions. So, what are capital budgeting decisions? Capital budgeting decisions involve long-term projects that are also typically very expensive because it takes a fair amount of time to go through the analysis. So it's only worth doing the analysis if the project is important to the firm. When we look at capital budgeting, we focus on the concept of value that the project will generate for the firm versus the initial cost that the firm will incur. So the main question we seek to address, and also the most important question for any company, is when should you invest in the project? So in this chapter, we're going to go over a number of tools that will help managers make these decisions. So these tools are guideposts, framework, and they are useful, but we also need to pay attention to the limitation of these tools. So these tools allow you to focus on the quantitative aspect of a project, but you also always need to keep in mind the qualitative aspect of a project as well. Before we continue, I want to introduce the concept of a mutually exclusive project versus an independent project. This may seem obvious once you hear it, but is oftentimes confusing when you're in the middle of an analysis. So in a nutshell, an independent projects are project that you can that they may be related, but they're independent. So that is often the point of confusion. So two projects can be related, but they are independent. The fact that they're independent means that if you accept one project, that does not affect whether or not you should accept or reject another project. So you could have two projects such as opening up two stores in two different locations, and they are definitely related, but they are not depending on each other. So if you decided that opening up a store in location A is a good idea, but opening a store in location B is not a good idea, you can still go ahead with opening up a store in location A. Vice versa, if you find that opening up a store in location A and B are both good ideas, then you go ahead and do both. So that is what we mean by independence. So when we are evaluating independent projects, then all we need from a decision standpoint is a minimum cutoff. Does this project pass the minimum threshold? On the other hand, if we have mutually exclusive projects, you can only choose one of several options. And if you have to make a choice, then you have to find a way to rank the projects. So that's the main decision criteria. So when we are dealing with the two different types of projects, remember that for independent projects, we only need a minimum cutoff. But for mutually exclusive projects, we have to rank and then make the choice. So what makes a decision criteria a good one to use? As we said, we're going to introduce multiple methods, multiple criteria, and what makes one method or one criteria better than next one. The few factors that we want to take into account is whether or not that particular criteria or method takes into account the time value of money. So the time value of money is important because it takes into account the opportunity cost of your funds. So if I don't invest in project A, what could I do with that money? Another is whether or not that decision criteria explicitly adjust for risk. So sometimes we may take into account risk in a qualitative sense, but if we can also quantify risk, that makes the criteria better because it allows us to be more explicit. We really have to list how much risk are we taking, and how does the risk affect the value of the project. And lastly, most important, we come back to value. Does this particular decision rule tells you whether or not the project we are undertaking will create value for the firm? Okay. So we'll stop here in this short introduction video. In the next video, we're going to go over the various criteria, various method. We use the term criteria and method interchangeably, and we're going to use an example to help us understand how to apply these different methods.